we have a company that's largely focused in Western Australia in this Pilbara region. It's tucked way up in the northwest corner of the country. I started Novo about 7 or 8 years ago to look for these conglomerate type gold deposits. Did a lot of academic work way back early in my career and decided the Pilbara is the place to be. When we formed Novo, we kept the company fairly tight, and we've maintained a fairly tight shareholding. We also have shareholders who are long-term holders. These are companies and individuals who have been with the company for a long, long time. We have 156 million shares out. Market cap is around $750 million, which is remarkable. We're quite highly valued, but it's really that speculative, promise that we can hopefully deliver a very large gold province here that's driving the stock price. With options and warrants outstanding, it comes to a little over 200 million shares. What's really, really important, we have about 70 million in cash at the moment, and that's critical because as a junior company, that's our lifeblood. That's what's going to help us move this project forward. All right, so shareholders, we've got a couple of major mining companies on the register. Kirkland Lake Gold came in last year. They put a $56 million Canadian placement into Novo in September. We're delighted to have them on a register. Good, strong shareholders. They saw the project and recognized the potential early on, and they were willing to jump in. So kudos to them. They come out to site regularly. They keep up to date with what we're doing, how we're doing things, and they recognize it was going to take a lot of money to advance this, hence the large amount that they took into placement. Newmont is also on our register. They've been with the company since around 2013. Again, they come to site regularly. They know what's happening. Look, we've got Mark Creasy as a large shareholder, very well-known prospector in Australia. He's a conglomerate believer and has been most of his career in life. Okay, I'm not going to go through all the people in detail here other than to say we have a first-class board, and recently I've built up a team of a management team in Australia to take the project forward. We're treating this like we're going straight from exploration to a mining project, so it takes a lot of horsepower to do that. So we've built up a very good team. You can read the details about these folks in our presentation online. I'm going to jump right into geology. Look, that's the Pilbara Craton. It's roughly 600 kilometers east-west. It's about 300 or 400 kilometers north-south. It's basically a lozenge-shaped piece of crust from early Earth's history. The pink rock and the green rocks you see there, that's the granite greenstone, which forms the core of the craton. It's the basement, if you will. And everything else, the blues, yellows, and kind of olive green there, that's all sedimentary and volcanic rock that's been laid down around the margins of the craton. And that's where the gold-bearing conglomerates reside. All right, so the little dots you see there tell us where conglomerates were when we first showed up as a company in 2010. Green dots are conglomerate occurrences up in what we call the Hardie Formation. Blue dots are conglomerates that occurred down at the bottom of the Fortescue Group in what's called the Mount Roe conglomerate, or at the base of the Mount Roe. We have a handful of occurrences there. The big one, Beaton's Creek, is really where we focus most of our efforts. That's the one in the East Pilbara there. Okay, but about a year and a bit ago, we recognized discovery of gold and conglomerates out in the Western Pilbara. We undertook an aggressive land staking and acquisition period from around April of last year till August, and we assembled something around 10,000 square kilometers in the Karratha region. That's that big blob of tenements you see kind of in the upper left-hand corner of the map. Karratha is a city along the coast, serves as an iron ore shipping facility, and really that's where Rio Tinto and a lot of the big operators, iron ore operators, are centered. But we're looking at gold. We're looking at the rocks below the iron formation around the margin of the basin. And our tenements cover a lot of that prospective ground. That's the East Pilbara. That's where we set up shop back in 2010. Again, Beaton's Creek, we spent a lot of time and money. It's advanced, and we're looking to move that forward this year. But it's Karratha here that's our kind of main interest at this time. Okay, we're going to talk about gold in this deposit. Very unusual gold system. I think one of the reasons that this deposit is still here is because it's truly unconventional. When we came over here, we're looking for conglomerates, kind of like you'd see in South Africa. We found something quite a bit different. What I mean by that is the gold here is extremely coarse grained. Most of the gold occurs as coarse nuggets that are basically frozen or have been frozen in conglomerate. You know, these are gravel deposits laid down 2.7 plus billion years ago. So these little nuggets have not seen the light of day for a very, very long time. Yet here we are. We've stumbled across this conglomerate occurrence, and we are now moving it forward, even with the extreme challenges around the nugget effect. Like I said earlier, we acquired about 7,000 square kilometers through staking, then through other strategic deals, including Artemis Resources, who you'll hear about here shortly. We assembled just under 10,000 square kilometers in the Ker Arthur area. All right, so that's a land map of just the Ker Arthur area. Green is 100% owned Novo. Blue is a joint venture with Artemis Resources. Orange is an option agreement we have with the local prospector, and then the pink, which is actually an important tenement, is what we call Comet Well, and that's a joint venture with a couple of prospectors. Okay, we're going to talk about the terrain and stuff here. So this is what the property looked like before any work was done on it. Low rolling grassy hills. You can see in the upper right there a photograph looking at the edge of the basin. Really, you have what's called the Kuya Puya Formation sitting on top of sedimentary rocks, including these targeted conglomerates, which you see in the bottom two photographs. That's what it looked like when we first arrived. But people had been finding gold nuggets with metal detectors out there for about 6 or 8 months prior to when I first set foot on the ground. And it was that discovery that really inspired me to come out into this area. All right, the gold is quite coarse. We refer to it as watermelon seeds. That name's kind of taken on a whole new meaning. Look, it's, you know, I don't want to make too much of the fact they look like watermelon seeds. They're basically, I'm saying they're alluvial gold nuggets. These are rounded, water-worn nuggets that have been trapped in conglomerates for a very, very long time. In July of last year, we took our first bulk sample. This sample was designed to test the nuggety nature of the conglomerate, and in particular to see how we were going to actually assay this material. In many respects, this is like tackling a diamond deposit. You know, we have nuggets scattered through a volume of rock, and you can see by the product that was generated, that's concentrate, that the nuggets range anywhere from a few millimeters up to a few centimeters in size. You know, so we knew we had to take large samples at that point. Very high grades, but also challenging in that it's nuggety and a large volume of material has to be sampled. And that's, I can't emphasize that enough. All right, so how did a deposit like this form? Well, if you wind back the clock and if you were standing around Ker Arthur 2.74 billion years ago, there would have been a series of low hills or highlands in the Ker Arthur city area at that time, and rivers and whatnot were carrying gravels from that region southward into the Fortescue Basin. So the Fortescue Basin would have had the ocean onlapping, and as the sediment was being brought down by these rivers, occasionally sea level would rise and fall and rework those sediments. So basically you have a kind of a battle going between fluvial sediments, being rivers, and the ocean reworking the shoreline. This slide here is actually a shot from Google Earth of the Yukon River Delta. So that's kind of the environment we envision for this type of deposit and how it formed or where it formed. That illustration right there shows this battle between the ocean. In this case, the ocean's on the left, and then river system, the fluvial system is on the right. Basically, as time goes on, sea level rises and falls, and because it does so, it can rework that sediment that's being brought to the shoreline by the rivers. And in effect, it concentrates gold, kind of like in a gold pan. So think of this like Mother Nature's gold pan. What is this deposit? Well, see that image on the left-hand side there. That's a submarine image. It shows a diver pointing. He has got rubber glove on, pointing at a gold nugget on the bottom of the sea at Nome, Alaska. At Nome, there's a huge, huge marine terrace that formed as the glaciers melted about 12,000 years ago. Sea level rose and this terrace formed, and you see gold nuggets scattered across that surface over a huge area. Well, that's shot on the right-hand side. That is our first trench at Purdy's Reward. it's basically a fossil version. It's like a frozen version of what you see on the left. Okay, so now we're going to look at a cross-section. This is a generalized cross-section through the Comet Well and Purdy's area. The little red trace you see there is about 8 kilometers long. That's where the conglomerates outcrop. They actually daylight. They dip to the southeast. So we're going to look at a cross-section along that black line. It's like slicing through the earth and looking at things from the side. We're actually looking southwest now, all right? And the trace of the conglomerate is shown in bright purple there. It sits at the bottom of the Fortescue group, dips ever so gently into the basin. Notice the scale on this. I've had to draw a 10-to-1 exaggeration, because if I try to draw it at actual scale, it would look like almost like a flat sheet of paper or something, and it wouldn't be very informative. But I've used a 10-to-1 exaggeration there. All right, but you can see the conglomerate sits on basement. That in turn is overlain by Mount Rowe basalt, which really froze the conglomerate in place. It locked it or sealed it off. And then you have the Hardie Formation, which is a series of sediments, sandstones, and conglomerates. And then the Kuya Puya, which is in the dark green at the very top. All right, last year, as we opened up trenches at Purdy's Reward, here's what we saw. We saw nuggets encapsulated in sandy matrix. The nuggets themselves constitute most of the gold, but there's a bit of reworked or chemically remobilized gold as halos around the nuggets. At Beaton's Creek, this is not from Cararthur, this is at Beaton's Creek. We have similar nuggets. They're quite a bit smaller than at Cararthur, but we do have a fine-grained gold component. Originally, we thought that fine-grained gold component was going to be present at Cararthur. Turns out not to be. Other than a little bit of halo gold we have around the nuggets, we're dealing with a very, very coarse gold system. That's what we're dealing with. That shows you concentrate out of one of our samples. Very coarse nuggets, anywhere from a few millimeters up to a couple centimeters across. That tells us we need to take very large samples. This year, as we advance the project, that's exactly what we're doing. This shows you some data that we've put out around grade distribution at Purdy's. You'll see right at the basement contact, most of the gold is concentrated over about a half-meter interval. There's a bit of gold that's worked down into the footwall rocks. There's a bit of gold above it. But really at Purdy's Reward, where we started working last year, most of the gold is concentrated in a very narrow horizon right at the bottom. This year, we decided, once we started working at Comet Well, we needed a means to sample and process those samples. So we secured a test facility at SGS Laboratory in Perth. This allows us to process 5 to 10 ton samples, which we're now doing. We opened up the Comet Well side of the system starting around February. Go back and look through news releases. You'll see that we drilled it with core drilling to get an idea of stratigraphy, distribution of these lithologic units, their depth, so forth. But it's the trenching that we did where we opened up the surface and are taking these bulk samples. That's where we're going to get the important data around grade. When we first opened up the trenches, and they're more like parking lots than they are trenches. These are huge areas. We would go in and metal detect. You can see them metal detecting here. When they find a nugget or a strike in the ground, they mark it with blue paint. So we get an idea of the distribution. There's a sequence down at the bottom about 4 meters thick, which appears to be quite rich with nuggets. There's pretty consistent nugget strikes. This was on the first day after we cleaned off the terrace. Here's how we're sampling things. You can see down in the lower left, we're using an excavator with a rock moil and a rock breaker. And they go in and sample a 2 by 2 meter panel and basically take samples about a half meter thick vertically down through the conglomerates. This shows you, our methodology here. So this is basically a profile of an area that we've sampled. You can see the depth slices that we've taken. Each one of those samples is currently at SGS Laboratory undergoing processing. People ask me all the time, when are we going to get data? Pretty soon. Look for news probably even next week. Recently, we found another unit above. Okay, there's another horizon roughly 15 meters above that unit, also laden with gold nuggets. We find quite a few nugget strikes in situ in the ground, but we now recognize that the stratigraphy of this unit correlates better with the Purdy's Reward. So we think we have 2 discrete gold-bearing horizons on the property. Our exploration plans this year take lots of bulk samples. That'll give us better handle on grade. What we're really trying to do is assess the ability to come up with a resource here. Okay, this is a nuggety system, kind of like evaluating a diamond deposit. We're going to see at the end of this, collecting this data, whether we have the means to put a resource together around this property. In summary, though, also we are going out now and we've hired geologists to go out and look at the rest of the ground we have. We're not just focused at Comet, we're starting to look at new areas. And we're finding more and more of this all across the Pilbara. Over the past 18 months or so, this is what's popped up. Many, many new gold occurrences. You can see how many more dots there are on the map compared to the first map I showed you. We've really opened up things. And when you think about this for a second, you're seeing the same gold mineralization in the same stratigraphic position across 600 kilometers. Let that sink in. We don't know if we have an economic deposit yet. We don't know if we can tie a resource to it. But the mere fact that we have gold scattered over 600 kilometers is astounding. Now, I'm going to move to a movie. Can you fire that up, please? Okay, so this is a video that we took, and I took it explicitly for the conference here to kind of give you a virtual tour of the property. We are at Comet Well right now. We're looking due west. You'll see there's a power line that just so happens to cross right over the property. That power line goes to Rio Tinto's iron mines. It's an auxiliary power line, so it's not actually charged right now, but man, what a handy thing to have. Power right over your discovery. Okay, so I'm going to use the pointer now. Hopefully you guys can see this. That's actually the sample site I showed you in the image a few slides back. That's where we took some of our first samples. This material here is the bottom of the conglomerate pile. Basement rock sits behind us. The conglomerates are dipping gently in that direction, which is southward, okay? But this conglomerate package, and you can get a sense of the boulders, they're quite large. This is about 4 or 5 meters thick. We see nuggets all through this with the metal detector, so we're quite encouraged by that. Here's our power line. You can see the high voltage lines going through here. Everything you see in the background, these are drill sites, and anything you see with a little road going out and a little square pad, those are drill sites. So we're doing core drilling, diamond drilling, to assess the stratigraphy, its depth, and so forth. All right, now we're looking northeast. So basically, we're looking along the strike of the conglomerate units through here. Now we're going to have another perspective over the power line area. We also call this Cannonball Gully because all of the boulders down here look like cannonballs. So the gold-bearing unit is this bit in here. Again, it's about 4 or 5 meters thick. And then we work our way up the stratigraphy here. Every once in a while, you can see a large boulder popping out. The entire thing is conglomerate. But this is the main prize down in here. Okay, another sample site is evident right there. All right, so we'll turn around and hopefully look up this, what we call the ski slope here. See these little white marks? We've gone in and done very precise geology now and identified the different strata. Basically, this unit down here is a marine lag deposit created, and it's concentrated gold in a bouldery conglomerate. The stuff that sits above it right here is what we call a fluvial or more of a terrestrial type conglomerate. It's deposited by rivers and such. But once we get way back up here to the top, right about in here, we see a marker horizon. There's an asphalt tuff, it's a volcanic unit. But just above that, we're finding another horizon. Again, it looks like a marine unit, and there's lots of nuggets scattered through this section here. We've recently trenched that, so we will have data from not only the one at the bottom, but this one here shortly. I think that this one, my gut says that this is the Purdy's horizon, and Purdy's, by the way, is about 3 or 4 kilometers on strike that way to the left-hand side of the screen. These little skinny trenches we dig almost as a prospecting exercise before we open things up, so we kind of get a handle on what we're dealing with by digging a skinny trench, and then once we identify the strata, we come in and clean off a bigger area. So you can see we've cleaned these quite thoroughly. We actually go in with high-powered air and blow off all the loose dirt and material. Okay, now we're going to look back towards the northeast. We're looking straight down the strike of the conglomerate. You can get a sense from the dark red color right through here. This is our conglomerate package. Again, there's a unit at the bottom on this side, and it's dipping ever so gently to the right under this area. The core drill right there is actually testing that unit at depth. You can see we're using excavators for doing a lot of our clearing. We've got water trucks and stuff to help wash stuff off as well. And now we're starting, like that's a drill pad, but now we're starting to open up some new trench areas. And we're doing this very carefully. You know, it might sound easy to find this unit, but man, when you start pushing dirt around, you can lose it really quick. So what we do is we kind of push the dirt back. Like I said, we open up a little cat scratch like this, so we know we're in conglomerate, and then we start pushing dirt back and clean it off with high-powered air, and then we'll detect this area. So this is the state of things right now, but in about 2 or 3 weeks, this should all be cleaned off, and we should be able to see the gold-bearing strata. Again, they're dipping underneath our feet, so they're dipping at us in the subsurface. They dip at a very, very shallow angle, maybe 3 or 4 degrees to the south and southeast. Prospectors, by the way, the reason we know the conglomerate's likely here is because at surface, there's zillions of little tiny holes where people have dug nuggets out of the soil over the past year and a half or so. So this will be where we collect data from our future site. Every once in a while you can see a boulder popping out, you know, clearly coming out of conglomerate. Okay, so we're gonna trundle along. We're going northeastward. By the way, that trench that we just saw was about 400 or 500 meters along strike from the first trench we opened up. That's a drill pad there, but now we're gonna see yet another trench site here. Sorry, the drone only moves so fast. I wish I could speed it up. Yep, we have our own porta potties. We built a little shelter out there. People get overheated. It is hot. It's about 40 to 45 degrees every day. Here's yet another trench site. We came in and opened up with an excavator, a little slot. We knew we were in conglomerate, so now we're starting to push everything back. We'll have this opened up. You can see a bit of geology is going on here. Again, lots of nugget digs in the soil in and around this area. Just gives a little bit different perspective. So now we're looking more or less down dip. This rock will dip underneath these rocks in the distance. Okay, so this is our target horizon, and it dips ever so gently away from our view here. There's the shadow of the drone right there. All right, here in just a jiffy, we will turn and we'll proceed further along strike. Those are our sample boxes. By the way, each one of those boxes holds about a ton of material. So each sample consumes about 4 or 5 boxes. So those get shipped down to SGS. They're put under lock when they're taken at site. We have scrutineers on site who supervise and make sure that everything we do is up to snuff. Here's yet another trench site that we're opening. Those boxes are designed so that at SGS lab, they can unscrew them very carefully without tearing the bag. There's a bag inserted in each box, kind of like a giant dumpster in a way, and they put the rock in there, but they then design it so they can open up the box at SGS and lift the bag out without tearing it, you know, so that we make sure we don't spill the sample when it gets to Perth. That would be a bit of a tragedy if we did. Okay, so now we're about a kilometer and a half along strike from where we first started. And off in the distance here, you can see Purdy's Reward. This is where we did most of the work last September through December. The boundary between Comet Well and Purdy's is right about in here. And you can see we've even got some plans to trench in these areas here too. This is a bit of alluvial working that was done by our joint venture partner recently. All of that area is where we collected our data last year. So I go back to news releases late 2017 to see, you know, get information on that. Again, the property boundary is right about underneath our flight path here. So Purdy's is effectively the strike continuation of Comet Well. All right, now we're looking back southwest, right along strike. So you can get a sense of how continuous this thing is. Look, I can't emphasize enough, if this proves to be continuous, if we can demonstrate good continuity, this is not a small gold project. This is a very, very large system. You can imagine these conglomerate horizons could potentially go into this basin for kilometers. There's drilling out into the basin. CRA drilled a hole years ago, about 50 kilometers south of here, and hit a very thick conglomerate section, you know, roughly in the same position that we see here. Not only that, there's companies clear down at Bellary Dome, which is on the south side of the Fortescue Basin. that have found the conglomerates where they come back up to surface nearly 250 kilometers south of here, and lo and behold, they're finding gold in the same units. So again, let that sink in. This is not a one-off thing. The question is, can we wrap our minds around this and define an economic deposit? I'm sure we're onto something big. The path forward is a hard one, but we got the cash in the bank to do it, and we certainly have we've worked our way up the learning curve. We certainly are on top of the game now. Look for news, look for sample news shortly. We should have continuous sample news over the next few months, and I think at that point we'll be able to tell you guys better about where this project's going to head. My guess is trial mining is in our future.